All right, class. So welcome to another visit. I'm really excited for this one. This time we have Sarah Beals Sager, and she is an anthropologist who works with a team that created um, the the website and then videos called Slightly Problematic. And also the reason or how I met Sarah was we both are members of the Themed Entertainment and Attractions Academic Society. And she presented on her master's thesis at one of the symposiums, and it was on film-induced tourism. And so I wanted Sarah to come talk to us about Slightly Problematic, about her thesis, and then also about her area of expertise in film-induced tourism and how that kind of plays into Disney fandom. And as several of you can probably pick out, my virtual background now is the Golden Oak Ranch, which is the Disney-owned property where they used to shoot television shows and movies and things. And actually the courthouse looking building behind me is the library that was featured in WandaVision. So without talking too much more, I want to welcome Sarah to class. And Sarah, if you can give us your background and kind of take us up to introduce us to what you did in the thesis and then what you did was Slightly Problematic. Thank you and welcome.
Thanks. Yeah, let's see. Okay. Ooh, life story. I grew up in Denver, and I knew graduating high school that I really loved theme parks. Um, Going to Disney World was my favorite present that I ever got from my grandparents and my parents and my aunts. Like, blew my 4-year-old mind. So, but there wasn't really a themed entertainment degree that was available when I started college. So I went to the University of Montana and got a degree in what is basically digital art. And I minored in theater and Irish studies. And while I was there, I did the Disney College program. After graduating, I did Disney again. I did corporate for a little bit back in Denver. And I was like, you know what? I think I really like this themed entertainment stuff. And there still wasn't really a degree. There was like 2 or 3 at this point, but nothing that I really was confident I could get into. So I decided to go to grad school and make a degree, where I went to the University of Denver and I was in the Masters of Anthropology program and the Masters of Library Science. Library science was super fun. I focused in archives, and my final project there was working with touring plans. They crowdsource wait times for a whole bunch of different parks. Those guys are super nice, and their data is just available if you ask them nicely. So that was awesome. And my anthropology degree was technically in museum and heritage studies. And I was just like, so I'm gonna go do a theme park. It's going to count as a museum. It's going to count as heritage. And they were like, yep, have fun. So that's what I did the last 2 years. And then I had the great fortune to graduate in the year 2020. And we started a company called Slightly Problematic, me and some of my anthropology cohort, where we do vlog, blog, podcast. That was the first 6 months was content creation. And now we're hoping to get into consulting and in between when we're creating content. So that is within the last week.
Very cool. And thanks for the introduction. And during your introduction, it actually made me think of in Colorado Springs, actually Manitou Springs. Have you ever you've been to, I believe it's called Santa's Workshop, isn't it? Or Santa's Winter Wonderland?
Oh no, it's called the North Pole.
Yes. No. Okay. Yeah, the North Pole should have known that. That was, you know,
It's
that
okay.
is,
It's the signs say Santa's Workshop. You're okay.
we went there when, I don't know, it was probably 12 years ago now when my nieces and nephews were visiting. And it, you know, it's this fun kind of like mountain theme park and everything that, so when you were saying that, it made me think of that, like being themed around. Yeah. And they even have the post office there that you can mail things that say the North Pole on them. So first, to get into your thesis, you did your thesis project on a theme park. However, I don't think many people really understand the type of theme park you went to, because a lot of people think of theme parks, Disney, Six Flags, Elitch Gardens in Denver, those type of things where there's a lot of thrill rides. Yes, there are shows, but there's a lot of, you know, themed lands and asphalt and everything. What did you do for your project that was a theme park, and it is something that is very eye-opening to many people, I think?
Well, I think it's actually pretty similar to how Universal Studios was set up. Like it's a film set turned theme park. So I was at Old Tucson Studios, which was built in 1939, and it was built to look like Old Tucson in the 1800s, like late 1800s. And it is right outside the city of Tucson, but it has a mountain range behind it, so you can't see the city at all. And yeah, it looks like an old West town. And it was making movies until the 60s. And that's when they were like, we could let tourists in here, make some money on the side. People love to watch movies get made. So that's what they did. They let tourists in while they were making movies. And it's been going on for 80 years. I think they had their 80th anniversary in 2019. It's closed now because of COVID. Like it is closed. The county's trying to figure out what to do with it. But oh, it is just a wealth of heritage and history, and that includes Westerns, it includes family vacations, but it also includes the people who were living there before the Tohono O'odham tribe. It just, that land has so many stories.
And so you, in the thesis, you talked about film-induced tourism. What exactly is film-induced tourism?
There's a book on it by Sue Beaton. She is my reference. Film-induced tourism is when people see a place associated with a piece of media and they decide to go with it based on the fact that they had a story-like experience with it. So one of the examples I like to bring up is Scotland had some historical sites, and once they started filming Outlander out there a couple years ago, they saw tourism just skyrocket because people were like, this is where Claire and Jamie were, that's where I'm going. So that is film-induced tourism.
Okay. And so basically people wanting to see, people identifying with a movie or TV show, some type of film, and then wanting to go see where that was produced.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Like,
it could be where it was filmed, could be where it was set. So an example of
yeah.
that is the Tombstone movie was filmed in Old Tucson, but Tombstone still gets tourism from it because it's called Tombstone.
And, you know, I think living outside of Memphis, Tennessee, I've kind of seen that as well, that there are a lot of movies that are that are set in Memphis that actually are not filmed in Memphis because of we'll get to a little bit later, some of the tourism and the filming tax breaks and everything that some states have offered and everything. For example, the movie The Blind Side is based, I actually live 10 minutes from that high school that was set in that film. However, that was produced and that was filmed in Atlanta. But so I do think, you know, we've kind of seen that here as well. But you focused in on Old Tucson Studios, which is famous for making Westerns.
Mhm.
So, and that's another thing that when I was reading through your thesis and I heard you talk at the symposium, um, and then I've also heard people talk about how Westwood, no, I'm sorry, how
Westworld.
Westworld, yes, thank you. Westworld is a Western, and how Mandalorian is a Western. And so there are certain aspects of the Western genre that I think I understand, but could you first kind of walk us through what a Western is, and then tell us why you focused on doing your thesis on a theme park or set that's famous for filming Westerns?
Yeah. So I'm gonna read exactly what I wrote because it was brilliant when I wrote it. So I define Westerns thematically rather than like it has to take place at a certain place at a certain time. Stick more with themes. And that does give me the freedom to include things like The Mandalorian and Westworld. So Western themes include um, agency or rugged individualism, and a moral code within the characters to administer justice, though they may often ignore or circumnavigate the law. Um, the story takes place outside the reach of settler colonial law. They're physically distant or difficult to enforce, and landscape has to play a major character in the story, whether it is a challenge or something that helps the human characters. So that is how I define a Western. And the second part of the question was, why did I focus on Westerns? Was that right?
Well, yeah, it was, but real quick follow-up to that then. Um, are there certain aspects of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier that would qualify as a Western? Like, are there certain because like I know with the Mandalorian, people have talked about, well, there are some episodes that were kind of a Western, some that are like this, space sci-fi, some that are more there are other types of genres. So do you see anything in the Falcon and the Winter Soldier that would resemble kind of a Western genre?
Oh, 100%.
Okay.
And that is one of the reasons why I really love Westerns, is because it is extremely malleable. Like, it can go sci-fi with Westworld or Mandalorian. It can go horror with Supernatural. Like, I consider Supernatural to be a Western as well. And the bit of where it crosses over with the superhero genre in Falcon and Winter Soldier is, let's see, okay. So they are definitely operating outside the law.
Mhm.
A lot of the times they are driven by their own moral code to not administer justice, but at least like fix what is wrong, you know? I think it gets into justice as we go through the season, but it starts with like, we just gotta like set some things straight. And then land might be the one part that we're not quite into yet, but it's not because it's not there. We see Sam really identify with Louisiana, which is great. Though I do have a question why Disney keeps setting all of its Black characters in Louisiana. I got questions about that. But we do have this overhanging elephant in the room that is Sokovia. And it's not like it's gone, but that land is still very much in play.
Yeah.
So that is what I think.
That's all. Yeah, that's great. And I didn't, because the land I was struggling with as well. You mentioned Sokovia. Do you think, because Baron Zemo, who to me seems like a character straight out of a Western, he is operating outside of the law. I mean, he's been broken out of prison, or technically
He's
broke himself
literally
out,
the
I
oil
guess.
baron.
And
Yeah.
he is trying to dispense justice in his in his way, or the way he, like the code he lives by. And he mentions, Sokovia being robbed by the land being robbed by all of their surrounding countries. Do you think, I don't know how much of a Marvel fan you are, like pre MCU, but do you think that maybe one of those countries is Latveria? Because that's a very big play on the future of the MCU and future of an MCU villain.
So I did get the Marvel subscription for my birthday a few weeks ago. So I am working my way through the Marvel comic universe. Um,
So I'm not, and I'm not like a big comics fan. I'm a MCU fan, and very recent MCU fan. Before Endgame came out is when I watched all of the movies. Um, but Latveria is where Doctor Doom is from, and Doctor
mhm.
Doom is like kind of in the comics version, was the most powerful supervillain. Now Thanos, in the MCU, is the most powerful supervillain because that's where they wanted to go. And I think because Josh Brolin's an amazing actor, but so I didn't know, like you mentioned that, you mentioned place, like, and there is the kind of this struggle over that land, and so it's very, very interesting. So to get back on the freeway though, we'll get to more Falcon and the Winter Soldier in a little bit, but so yeah, the second part of the question was, what made you choose to focus on a Western, or a place that's famous for filming Westerns?
Yeah. So, I mean, first off, like, who doesn't love Westerns? Like, we know they're problematic, but they're still fun, right? Like, um, there is something about just being able to explore and um, have a small community. And yeah, it's just, look, it's built into our school systems, the uh, pioneering spirit, the manifest destiny, which are now becoming dirtier words as time goes on. Um, that doesn't mean it's still not fun to think about how you would do something back then, and to follow those stories. So yeah, my family, big Westerns fans, like they were just part of my life growing up. Um, and the reason I picked Old Tucson, I was actually looking at University of Arizona for grad school. And while I was down there, my aunt took me to Old Tucson Studios because my grandpa had taken her when she was a kid. And she was like, look, it's a little weird, but I promise you're going to love it. And I was like, I love it. So even I had that experience of like generational tourism. And I was like, there's something here. And yeah, do you let me do it?
The and what do you think it, like you said, everybody loves Westerns. They're problematic, and we'll get into slightly problematic here next, because it's fascinating, the what you all are doing and the approach you're taking. But why do you think people love, why do we identify so much with Westerns? Even if I think a lot of people don't really understand, myself included, everything that goes into what a Western is.
Mhm. So this was a question I asked my participants. And the answer I use a lot is it is a time of immense freedom and possibility that may or may not be something that we have now, whether that is where we are in the timeline or where we are just as adults. Like you don't have that literally a continent worth of possibilities open in front of you. So it is just, yeah, that's how it was described to me, was Westerns equal freedom and possibility in a way that you might not get in your day-to-day life.
And is it accurate to say it almost throws, I mean, it throws caution to the wind? Like you talk about responsibilities as an adult, like yes, you cannot go and jump on a horse and ride to the next village through desert and have the adventures you have along the way, and you can't handle things the way that they're handled like in westerns, as far as like camping out and finding your all of your resources wherever you need them. Is that accurate also to say that's kind of what a western is?
In that the Western is freedom or possibility.
Yeah, and that it's kind of that like people identify with wanting to throw caution to the wind, maybe not having the responsibilities that people feel like they have on a day-to-day basis.
Yes, the escapism, it's real.
And I mean, that's, we talk about that in this class all the time, the escapism of going to the movies, being in the parks, and everything that comes with that. The participants in your study also kept going back to, there were major themes that they used, or characters they used, to identify westerns with. What are those characters or settings?
So yeah, it wasn't unexpected, but it was still just kind of like, oh man. like so the question I asked was, which Western character do you relate to the most? And at least half, like, I don't know, maybe not quite half, but a big amount of people were like, well, I relate the most to John Wayne, who A, is not a character. I mean, it's not his real name, and he kind of only played one character, so like there's an argument for that. But also I was also asking, please give me your race and gender identity. And a lot of these people were not white men who were saying they related the most to John Wayne. And granted, I was asking adults, like I did not have the ability to ask kids, and I'm not super good at guessing age, so I was probably skewing a little bit towards the older side. But yeah, to see that by far the majority was John Wayne, or if I opened it up, Clint Eastwood was another one that came up a lot, and then a lot of other white male historical figures like Wyatt Earp and the like. So it was just like, we still have these people who may or may not have been characters, like their line is really blurred between real people and characters, and but they all kind of match one particular demographic, which is the white male. And I'm like, but aren't we more than that as a society at this point? So that's what I found. But yeah.
And I think that, you also talked about like kind of the number of westerns that appear in different decades in our past, and just the immense amount of westerns that were available in like the 40s and 50s and 60s. And do you think people identifying with those characters and those men, is that a an outcome of, those are the movies that are being replayed, they're syndicated because they've been around so long, and they kind of go together, but how much of it has to do with that, and how much of it has to do with, well, that's the stories that were being told because of the people making the decisions. The people making the decisions, they were casting people that looked like them, that resembled them, that maybe they wanted to resemble them. And they were kind of casting them in places that kind of they thought of, that maybe, as you said in the thesis, kind of takes people back to a time where there's sort of less questions that have to be answered and less things that have to be dealt with.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, that time period is when John Wayne was making just an insane amount of movies. Like the 50s through the 70s was just he was the guy. So for sure, just by sheer quantity, it makes sense. But that was also a great time of social change in the United States as well. We had the second wave feminist movement, we had the civil rights movement, we had the American Indian movement, we had the Vietnam War. Like that was a great time of upheaval. And so that is when Westerns usually see a bump, is when Americans are looking for something to make sense. And so that is how it was. I don't think that's necessarily how it's going to be going forward.
And then, so what do you think? Do you think the popularity of Westerns also has to do with the fact that now we don't see what people think of as the quote unquote traditional Western much? We're told, like we watch The Mandalorian and we enjoy it. And we're told, hey, there's pretty strong Western elements in that. Oh, really? Well, it takes place in space. How does that, And we're seeing all of these things that we're enjoying, but we don't necessarily, we see an old John Wayne movie or we see a movie set like Tombstone, we know that's a Western because of the setting. How much do you think that has to do with it as well? Like the setting and the way that it's kind of certain things are just out in your face and they're hard to overlook, whereas others maybe are left up to a little more interpretation for people.
In that people, wait, what was the beginning of that question?
Sorry. So the popularity of Westerns seemingly has waned. Do you think that has to do with, how much does that have to do with setting? That people could watch Westerns, and if it's set in an environment that's like a desert or small town, like small desert town, you think that's automatically a Western. If you're watching something that's set in space, there's a little bit of interpretation that comes with that. Now, obviously, like episode 9 of The Mandalorian, the Marshal, that was, I think a lot of people could pretty clearly see that. But how much do you think setting has to do with it?
Yeah, I mean, I was not having in-depth conversations with all of my participants about, well, are you sure you don't relate to the Mandalorian? Because he's an option. But yeah, that probably is something that could come up. And I mean, you got me thinking about Firefly, which is absolutely a Western. Like they have a spaceship, but it is far more Western themed than sci-fi themed, I think, in a lot of cases. So that's where my mind went, was even if you see something like Serenity, or Serenity is the movie, Firefly is the show, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You see that, and to me, I'm like, I don't need to, like, that I don't know that I can be told that it was a Western. Like that was pretty clear. They just happened to have a spaceship. So yeah. And as far as setting, it has also become harder to film in Arizona because of tax incentives. So the reason why Old Tucson was not getting a whole lot of business in the last couple of years, just because it was cheaper to film in other places. That's not to say that you can't have Western towns in other parts of the United States, but if you want specifically the Old Tucson look, they just weren't enticing enough to whatever producers were in charge.
Yeah. Well, and you talk about the specific Old Tucson look, and you talk, and I'm going to mispronounce it, but I think it's pronounced the Seguro cactus. and you talk
Saguaro.
about saguaro.
Yeah.
Thank you. You talk about that and how it only appears in pretty much that specific area of the United States. However, because that so many things were filmed there and that's been so widely distributed, like people think you're going to go anywhere in the West and that's what you're going to see, much like, a lot of the people growing up, when I would tell them when I moved and tell them I'm from Texas, they would ask the questions of how many horses are there, how many horses do you have, things like that, which was very, very interesting from the thesis as well. So I also I kind of want to, and this sort of dovetails into our next topic, but you teamed up with some other people in your cohort, and as you said, you started the business slightly problematic, and it's so interesting what you all are doing, because you're looking at anthropology from different areas. But can you explain to us what slightly problematic is and what you all are trying to do with the content?
Yeah. We are a group of, at the moment, 4 anthropologists who, again, all had the great fortune of graduating in 2020. And we wanted to, just, we saw that the world was changing. Like, it's obvious at this point. And so the jobs that we had been training for when we started graduate school, that's not what they look like now, if they exist at all. So we're like, we need to come up with something. And so it's got 2 parts. Well, I guess 3. Part 1, which we've been working on for the last 6 months, is releasing content. It's a podcast, vlog, blog. Like, we just release it in 3 different ways. It's the same content, no matter how you consume it. We want to make sure you can get to it. And we all talk about what our areas of expertise are. So I focus on tourism, intersectionality, and old Tucson Studios. And that was the last 6 months, was just proving that we knew what we were talking about. The second part is our website is also what we hope to be like a living, growing resource for people who are either casually into anthropology or are looking to really be anthropologists. And that comes from me having never taken an anthropology class before I started graduate school. I was very confused for a long time. What did I sign up for? But just having like books, videos, and we have a pretty lengthy land acknowledgement page, which goes into like how to write a land acknowledgement, what it means, and a whole bunch of resources that we hope people will take part in, whether it's like, here's a podcast so you can educate yourself. Here's some brands if you just want to drop some money with some indigenous owned brands, whatever it takes. So that's part 2. And part 3 is we're going to start hopefully consulting pretty soon, specifically with our areas of expertise are museums and community organizations, and hopefully helping to do some decolonization, DEI work. That is slightly problematic.
And first off, the way that you're building it is a class in entrepreneurship, that you're setting up, showing you're setting up that you are experts and that people can listen to you, and here's good information when they listen to you, and then you're providing more information with the site and kind of this working document, this living document, and then the consulting that will come. Like, first, I think people who are interested in entrepreneurship, I think that's a very good lesson, to kind of look at the model that you 4 are using.
Which if I may expand on that a little bit more, the model is specifically a co-op where it is a flat structure. We all have an equal say. We did not want to be like, because we're anthropologists, like
Mhm.
we're little socials, a little bit. um, so we really did not want to have a hierarchy at
Yeah.
all with this business. And we're like, we don't have to.
Yeah, I think that thanks for pointing that out. I think that's really cool to, especially as we're moving forward and people getting, kind of having ideas shared and having ideas heard. I think is, thanks for pointing that out. Another thing that I think is really interesting about Slightly Problematic is the title. And before we started recording, we were kind of talking about, I told you how I interpret Slightly Problematic. And so we were sort of talking about that. So can you tell us what what does the term slightly problematic mean? And how did you all come about that title?
It was a very democratic process. We workshopped it a lot between ourselves. It was not my idea, I will say that. My idea was not as good. But um, to us, what it means is that kind of like that cringe where you're like, ooh, that is not, that that could be better. Um, Slightly problematic is like, for example, one of our members, Madison, she did a topic. She's specifically talking about museums and how um, they can be pretty cringy when they're talking about other cultures if other cultures were not involved in how they're being represented. And you're just like, slight problem right there. And we didn't want to stop there. The next step of Slightly Problematic is we're getting better. And that is we are identifying the problem and we're going to talk about how we can make it less cringy.
And I really like, I love that approach, that it's like you point out, here's where we can get better, and here's ways we can get better. And so one, it's inclusive, that
Mhm.
it's how can we do this? It's not how can you do this? How can I do this? It's how can the collective do this? And so you mentioning things that can be cringeworthy. Um, and that kind of gets into like how what representation means and how important is representation. In the past, I know there have been many companies, and a lot of, movie companies and film companies were doing this as well, um, that they would try to portray a different culture, or they would try to portray different ideas. And but they came out, to use the term, slightly problematic. In some cases, very problematic. If you look at certain things that have been released and no longer will ever be released. Um, but why do you think, or what could you attribute to those things being problematic? Was it the stories being told, or how much does it have to do with the people telling the stories and trying to tell the stories?
So to answer that, it's both, but it's people. Like if you had involved the right people from the beginning, that cringy story would not have been told. And like if you had involved them and given them like equal
Mhm.
agency, it wouldn't have happened. So that is sorry, I was just flashing back. I was like, yeah, that one, that one, that one, that one. um and that is why collaboration is super important. And again, I'm coming from museum background. Like that is what we talk about is like, look, this exhibit, it's going to take forever to build, but it's going to be good. It's not going to be offensive. and it's going to have exactly what the audience should know. So collab, build a budget and know that it's going to take time, and that's okay, you know, because especially if it's not your story to tell, like
And
that's just common decency, right?
yeah, I think that I think that was lost. I maybe not lost. I'm not sure if the argument can be that that it wasn't discovered. People didn't know when some of the more problematic projects were made and still are today, that people didn't know, that people were making best efforts to do specific things and trying to, I've heard arguments that people were trying to kind of open people's eyes to different cultures or different ideas. But, you know, they still are problematic. So when you hear those types of arguments or justifications, um, like how do you move forward from that? Like if somebody says, well, this was done this way because people didn't know, or because this was the first step in trying to, you know, open up audiences' eyes or exposure or something like that. How do you move forward from that without just saying, you know, no, that's not the case and that's it. You can point, as you say, on slightly problematic, you point it out and you say, here's how we make it better.
Yeah, that's all it is. Like you have no obligation to leave it how you found it. Like to me, heritage isn't just preservation, it is evolving. Like there's some things that yes will stay the same, but it's not also change is not always a terrible thing either. So and sorry, if you want to have like a specific example, I can do that too. If you were
Go
thinking of a specific.
go ahead. No, I'm you go ahead. I was just asking if you have
Cool.
if you have an example, please.
I'll bring up this conversation I had with my dad when they first announced that Splash Mountain was going to go for refurb and become Princess Tiana, Princess and the Frog themed. I was plumbed. I was like, this is what I've been saying. This is what we all been saying. It's about time. Thank you. Because as you mentioned, it's based on Song of the South, which Disney has not shown publicly since I believe the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you know it's that bad, why is the ride still there? And I think I have no idea why, but here we are, 2020. They announced we're not going to do that anymore. Super great. But my dad, who loves to play devil's advocate because that's who he is, he's like, but what about all those animatronics? They were like groundbreaking and they're important, aren't they? Like, how would you want to destroy that? And I'm like, well, yes, because it was really only good for one group of people, and that group was oblivious. And this is going to be better. Don't think I don't know that Prince and the Frog was still directed by two white dudes. Like, there's still some themes in Prince and the Frog that I think we could do better. But just it's going to be better. Splash Mountain is not going to be that. Ooh, there's something weird here, but we're not going to talk about it. Like, no, we're gonna make it for Tiana. It's going to be her thing, and that is excellent storytelling in my opinion. And those animatronics that have been there since the beginning, like, I'm sorry, like they're going to be repurposed probably, and even though like they're important, like people have family memories attached to all these songs and rides. The one of the things that we all know Walt Disney said was Disneyland will never be finished. And even though he made some racist rides based on racist movies, I think it is awesome that we are trying to change that because that was still in the spirit of Disneyland is making something and continuously getting better. And that's how I feel.
Well, and I think a lot, at least the Disneyland version, a lot of the characters in the Disneyland version were repurposed from what America Sings. And then maybe even at the Walt Disney version, it was from Mickey Mouse's review. That's kind of one reason they sort of developed the ride, is they had all of these animatronics left over, and they were all animals because they were from America Sings, and that was a show that featured animals from across America, and so they could kind of incorporate all of these animatronics into a new ride. And here, when we had the discussion in class, this is the first semester that we've had the discussion since, I guess, second semester that we've had the discussion of the ride being rethemed, since the decision was made over the summer, or the announcement was made, I should say. Somebody brought up a really, really interesting point, that they can't just kind of retheme it, but not really change much of it. That if they retheme it and not change much, and keep in mind that I think probably, the track is probably staying the same. The 60-foot drop is staying the same. Like, those things are, because that would be very cost prohibitive.
And there's nothing wrong with the drop.
Well, unless you don't like, and unless you're afraid of drops, then you're probably not doing it, I suppose. But how much do you think they need to change in order for it to be something that people can embrace, and people that is more representative to people who attend, and that people don't just get on and they're like, oh, well, I can see here was this scene, here was this scene, here was it. People are obviously going to do that have ridden Splash Mountain a lot. But how much do you think needs to be rethemed in order to do it justice?
I don't know, but you know what I would give to be at that table when they're discussing it? Yeah, well, I would like to say, first off, like, as you said, cost. Disney didn't make this decision because it was the nice thing to do. Like, they had some accountant somewhere who said, this is going to be a good decision financially as well. So someone has already done that math, which I'm glad they did. We're gonna gain more than we're gonna lose by retheming this. And if I may bring one of my theorists into this, with a specific example about Hamilton, the musical. She explains, the theorist is Patricia Hill Collins, and
Okay.
she does intersectionality. Her explanation of why Hamilton rocks is because it is not the same old story of the American founding myth, just recast with different people. It is 100% built from the ground up with the other people in mind. Like, they're gonna sing it, they're gonna dance it, and they're going to perform the heck out of it. Like, it wasn't just 1776 with some different actors. It is a completely different story, but it is still a myth, and that is why it's awesome.
And you bring up Hamilton, and first, I mean, Hamilton is the show that was sold out. People, you could not get tickets to. I was lucky enough to see it one time live when it came here to the Memphis area.
Can I tell you?
Yeah.
I got tickets for it, and with the pandemic, I might see it next spring. It's been postponed to so many times.
Well, hopefully you get to see it. It is everything it's more than what you are thinking in your head. Now, obviously now you've seen the pro shoot of it on Disney Plus, but for me, it was the soundtrack I still listen to sometimes when I'm outside mowing and working in the yard. And it's also the most expensive, or I should say, Disney spent the most to purchase the rights to Hamilton than has ever been spent on a pro shoot of a theater production. And when they made the decision to release it over July 4th weekend, to me, it was so amazing that, first of all, when I heard they were purchasing Hamilton, I thought, okay, so in 2 or 3 years, we're going to get a theatrical production of Hamilton. And I imagine we probably still will at some point in the future. And then I immediately went to, man, how are they going to do that? Because it's so difficult there's so many different changing scenes in that and situations. And when I heard it was the pro shoot, that was really, really exciting, because then it's like, okay, now people can watch that have never been able to watch. And you're going to be paying some places $20 to go to see it in a movie. But at least you're not going to be paying what you would if you go see it live. And then when they released it, I thought, oh, this is, wow, talk about trying to engage your consumer base during a pandemic when you can't get out and do other things. It's also the movie that kind of led to Disney getting rid of their 7-day free trial on Disney Plus, so that at least if people only wanted to watch Hamilton, they would have that month. But how would you respond to the people who say, so Hamilton, yeah, it's great. It's a different telling, but it's still telling this myth, and it's still kind of, it addresses issues like slavery, but it's sort of kind of, does it skirt around the issue as well, or swerve around the issue as well? Like, how do you respond to, because I've read certain criticisms of it as well.
Oh yeah, Hamilton, hella problematic. There's no way around it. Like, it's got a lot of the heteropatriarchal themes, a lot of white supremacy themes. It's got complete erasure of indigenous cultures that were there before, and still are there now. Like, yeah, it's still got some, it's not perfect. It is extremely far from perfect. And the interesting thing that if you read my blog on intersectionality, there's there's Twitter conversation about this too, because as you know, Lin-Manuel Miranda, very active on Twitter. We got Hamilton the musical in 2016, and we got Hamilton the movie in 2020. And in those 4 years, America went through huge social change, just massive. And seeing the movie in 2020, there were some things that you're like, oh, this hits real different now. This is not as good as it was, which in my opinion is excellent. Like, that shows growth. Mm-hmm. It shows that things like decolonization and DEI work, they're never going to end. Like, something that we held this high, it's not going to be there forever as long as we keep getting better. And that is so good. Like, one of my colleagues in the Corps, he was like, I hope that everything I'm saying here today will become slightly problematic in the future, because that will mean that we made some changes, and that's excellent. So it's still catchy. Like, am I ever going to get rid of the Hamilton CD? No.
That's a great observation, and that notion of things becoming more problematic as seems like it's a sign of progress. And I'm a believer that progress happens one step at a time, and what happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 50 years ago in filming, um, doesn't, like you said, it's not the same today as it was. Now, is that kind of, I I don't really know how to say it other than, is that kind of an excuse that because you hear the, well, the timing of things, and when this was happening, this is kind of what people were going through and the country was going through. And shows like Friends, when it came out, when it got big on Netflix within the last year and a half, people talked about how problematic a lot of the themes they dealt with in that show were as well. And what, so as we move forward, then how do you address something like that? Like, is there kind of the old, not really excuse, but reasoning, I guess, that, or justification that, well, this was made this long ago, so the level of understanding we have now, and to the where the understanding was then, we've come this far, and so let's celebrate how far we've come, that actually we can acknowledge that now. If that makes, that long-winded question makes sense. Sorry.
No, I think that's totally right. It's similar with Disney moved Peter Pan and Dumbo and Aristocats to their adults only page. I don't think it's called that, but yeah, just look, these things were wrong at the time and they are wrong now. And we don't think we should give them freely to children unless they're going to have the context around why it's wrong. And those movies in particular, and Westerns in general, and sure, Hamilton, I think they are very important time capsules of where maybe people in power thought we were at as a society. So that's me, that's my archivist, my heritage coming out. Just, this is not necessarily a bad thing. It's definitely not good, but it is important to see how far we've come. And I mean, like, by that stretch of the imagination, like, why are we still reading extremely problematic literature in K through 12? Just because some old person wrote it a while ago and it was considered a classic. I know there's more about it than that, but like, I mean, that's just my archivist. Like, don't throw it away unless like, if we can still learn something from it, you know? But am I personally gonna seek out to watch those movies? Probably not. Am I gonna watch Song of the South? Absolutely not. But I think throwing them away, specifically media, throwing it away like that, we will lose something there. Like,
One thing that's really, really interesting is, like you said, as long as something can be learned, then something shouldn't be thrown away. One added benefit of streaming services is companies are finding ways to produce content more efficiently. I mean, most people have probably heard like what they did with the Mandalorian, and the Mandalorian being so successful that now they've built, I think there's going to be a total of 5 of those studios around the world where they basically can produce this digital world around someone, and it all comes from like gaming and everything that, so things can happen more efficiently. Do you think it would be good to include on a streaming service like Disney Plus or other streaming services, commentary about these movies? and like a discussion with people on these movies, do you think that would help? And do you think that would might help someone who looks at these movies and says, well, this was just kind of a time capsule, and so I don't, people who are less able to see or maybe willing to see the problems of projects, you think something like that would help?
I think if someone wanted to, like, I can see that being problematic. Putting out a job advertisement seeking someone to explain to people why Peter Pan is problematic. But yeah, I think that might actually be a pretty good idea. Just to like, I'm thinking of the Emperor's New Groove when Cusco pauses the movie to like point something out. That could be fun. I can I might get into that.
and that is not my idea. I cannot say that is my idea. I've heard people talking about, hey, why don't you have an educational 5 or 10 minute thing in front of some of these movies to explain why this is problematic, and actually have people that are negatively impacted by that content, like as part of that conversation, and explanation and everything. So the
I
next
think it
thing.
comes down to, yeah, if they want to. If
Okay.
I think if the affected peoples would rather that the movie go down, like, they're the ones who have been wronged. So if they're okay making a statement at the beginning, I think that would be great. I would totally get into that. But I don't think I don't speak for everyone that has been marginalized by Disney animation. So.
And that was kind of, I also, I want to get into, there have been slightly problematic, in some instances very problematic projects that have been put out, theatrical projects, television projects, even some of the things that have been done in some of the parks, and some of the things that kind of have been represented in the parks that aren't necessarily representative. So moving forward, how do you think, looking at kind of of what's happening right now and the slate of productions and everything that's coming out from the company, how do you think Disney is moving forward in the kind of trying to be more inclusive and trying to tell more stories?
I saw something yesterday on the LinkedIn's. Jay Francis shared something that's like short films that are going to be made and released on Disney Plus, and I was just like, oh, okay. Like, they've built this massive unrivaled platform that Disney Plus is, and they are, I think, using it somewhat responsibly in this case. Like, we're gonna give people who maybe need this platform, we're gonna give them some time, and they will tell their story. And I'm so pumped. I think it's called Launchpad. I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
And that's something that Pixar does as well, is they have the shorts. And so I'm pumped for that. I feel like there was more to that question though.
Well, how do you think they are moving? How are they doing moving forward with inclusivity? I mean, there have been projects where, if a lot of the problem comes from the people telling the stories, and maybe their intent is to open audiences' eyes, but they're really reinterpreting a story, then, there have seemingly been steps, or been missteps as well, of including underrepresented people as decision makers. Is that the path forward to really kind of understanding more about these stories that we're trying to watch?
Oh, for sure. Like you look at what is it, the animators, the nine old men that
Hmm.
Disney had? Like, for real? That's not what it's gonna look like in the future, I
Yeah.
don't think. And not because there's anything wrong with old men, but because there are a lot of stories to tell. And not like and you just need more people in order to get all those stories out. And I think we saw that with Mandalorian. Like they had that that bonus uh episode series where they
Hmm.
talked about the making of the Mandalorian, and it was like, oh, this is a lot of people that got
Yeah.
involved, and they all had an equal say. It sounds like so that was thrilling. And I think we saw it. I haven't looked at who is the production team for Falcon Winter Soldier, but that conversation that Sam had with Isaiah on Friday night. Well, I don't know when people are listening to this, but for me, it was Friday
Spoiler
night.
alert if people haven't seen episode 5.
Spoiler. um, like that is not a conversation that I think would have had unless they had Black men on the writing team. And I was just blown away. I was like, whoa, that is not something we would have saw 10 years ago when Marvel started for a multitude of reasons. Namely, we were focused on Iron Man's story.
Hmm.
Like, Falcon was not even a glimmer in our eye at this point. And now, like, he's just that moment for me, I was just like, oh, we're doing this now.
Yeah.
We're having this conversation right here, right? Okay, all right. 10-4. And it's been wow. My Twitter and my Instagram is just full of some really interesting, good conversations that just make me feel like this was good.
And you know what, like on that, and I was gonna also mention, like, there's now, I might mispronounce it, but the series Awaju is coming out that is like kind of Disney working with a company that actually kind of set out to say, like, hey, we're like, look what we can do versus what Disney can do. And Disney, being Disney, they
Whoa, whoa,
they
whoa.
do
Our
they do
accountants
buy a
did the
lot of
math.
stuff. What's that?
Our accountants did the math, and we should actually work together.
Yeah. And that, but what they have been able to do so far with the 2 MCU stories that they've told on Disney Plus, and people have mentioned it a lot, that it's because they have time to let these stories breathe and let these stories develop, that they can get into these characters so much more than they could in a 2-hour movie or 2.5 or 3-hour movie even. But it has been, both of them have just been amazing. I mean, let's start with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, since that's the one that's right now. We're filming this we're filming this before the season finale comes out. Yeah, the things that Sam Wilson has had to deal with, not getting a loan at a bank, getting
Who
in
wouldn't give Falcon a loan? Are we serious?
getting in, uh when him and the scene where him and Bucky have an argument. It's not an argument, it's a discussion, as they said, in the streets, and the police pull up, and his conversation with Elijah Bradley, and the story of Elijah Bradley, and people actually, when he first was shown in episode 2, people talking about, oh, well, here's his story, and here's what it has represented. Yeah, I mean, they're going very deep into not just the, like, kind of history of the comics, but they're going very, very deep into some issues that can really help some people kind of talk about or be exposed to those issues, or kind of finally maybe have to accept those issues, because this is a superhero genre that a lot of people are consuming. They're doing a fantastic job, and more comments on that, please, like on how you think they're doing with this.
Yeah, I one thing that I also was floored at was the couples therapy that
Yes.
Falcon and Winter Soldier had. I was like, oh, men in therapy together? Oh, husband is a therapist. So I was like, do you see what's happening? They do the thing. So that was also um a moment where I was just like, oh, we're gonna normalize these things that have been um just full of stigma. And I'm just like, this is great. Um, but the moment that like hit me in the gut was, oh, I don't know if we've mentioned for podcasters who might not be able to see me, I'm not 100% white. I'm mixed race, including black. Um, so sometimes that matters. um, Seeing Sam have that conversation about you shouldn't serve America because it would not fight for you. Like, that is a real conversation and a real decision that I guarantee you, as a character, Sam has not had to make just this one time. Like, he is a soldier and like can't even fathom what he must have gone through. But it's something, it is a recurring theme in the Marvel universe. Like we just watched Captain Marvel, like she goes through the same thing of why would you fight for this culture, nation, entity that's not going to fight for you? And it comes down to because it's the right thing and I can make a difference. But and that is something that, you know, it's in Marvel, but it's also very much in American culture as well. We have the Tuskegee Airmen who, you know, faced racism before, during, and after their service. Similar with the Japanese, I cannot remember, but World War II, they were like, you can come out of the internment camps, we're going to send you on suicide missions, essentially. And it was like, cool, I guess those are my choices as a Japanese person in America in the 1940s. That's not okay. But it's a story that has repeated throughout time. And so just to see it in this massive platform that is Disney Plus, is the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and to see Sam make that decision, like I said, probably not for the first time, of, well, Captain America, he's going to be black today. That's what I've seen on the Instagrams. For cosplay, we did a cosplay episode a few weeks, months ago. Unclear, podcast time. And that is something like when cosplayers of color, that is a comment that comes up a lot, is like, insert character is not black. Well, they're gonna be black today. And that's because I'm gonna be that character. And seeing Sam do it, oh, it was just, it's been a moment that I've been reliving all weekend. Like,
And I listen to the MCU fan show a lot, and the people on there do, for every episode they do a spoiler review, and it's really good, and they have really good commentary as far as like keeping up with kind of, because they do talk about what happens in the comics, but then, you know, most of it is what's happening in the MCU and how things in the MCU follow the comics, but not necessarily are identical to the comics. And so they've been, you know, this last episode was named Truth, was titled Truth. And there is an episode, I'm sorry, there's a series, a book series titled Truth that's about Elijah Bradley and about the experiments, which were, as I heard on the MCU fan show, so I can't take credit for it, but were kind of Marvel's version of the Tuskegee experiments. And they do a really good job of kind of talking about just how that scene where his nephew traces the star on the shield, and now how that kind of storyline that's been running through the series about how it hasn't necessarily represented everyone the same. Now there's an opportunity that it will represent more people, which is really, really cool. And I mean, just really, really strong. Every semester I have students tell me how important the movie Black Panther is, because of the representation, not just the representation on screen, but the representation of the decision makers and people writing and directing, and just, for someone like me, who, again, we talked about, as I watch a superhero movie and typically I see someone who I can identify with, um, physically identify with. And so I haven't experienced that. And so for people to be able to experience that now is truly awesome, and is another one of those signs of progress, and us taking steps toward progress. And this morning, Marvel just released the trailer for Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. And that's another area where maybe people will be brought into it. It is an amazing trailer. Will be brought into kind of the fold. And it's very refreshing that now you have this major brand that they're able to do this. And as we said, they are doing this because it's good for the bottom line as well. But that shows the progress that these projects are being consumed the way that they are. So there could be more stories that are being told.
And if I may add one other part that like was a particular gut punch of this last episode, that I think speaks to having people of color making the decisions in storytelling. The two Captain Americas we've had up to this point did have super soldier serum. Sam is taking the mantle of Captain America, and he has built his body by himself. It stands, like, to me, I see that same thing of people of color have to work 10 times as hard to get to where privilege has gotten certain other demographics in America. And so just seeing him have his little training montage scene, I was like, Sam, you're working so hard. And it was just, I don't know if he's gonna take a serum. We still got time. I don't know if there's any left. Wasn't looking good. But just seeing that, yes, we're going to have a Black Captain America, and we're not going to say that he doesn't get a shortcut. Like, he is going to earn this shield, even though he already did. Like, as far as Steve Rogers was concerned, Sam was the one who should have had it. But in order for Sam to think he deserves it, he has to work twice as hard. Ugh. This show, man.
It started in, again, the MCU fan show is the one that pointed this out to me. It was promoted as a buddy comedy. And then
we were lied to.
You get all of these moments that it's still that fun buddy comedy, but you have all of these really deep moments that are extremely important. And real quick, before we transition to the last thing, there's also that idea of the first two projects that have come out on Disney Plus have dealt with some very strong themes. We just talked about the Falcon and the Winter Soldier and dealing with race relations. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier is also dealing with some PTSD as well, with Bucky Barnes and what he's going through. That was a major theme in the theme of loss in WandaVision. And so I want to get your thoughts on that, because to me, it's like when you see superheroes dealing with these types of issues, that can also be something that tells people, okay, it's okay that, to admit this, to talk about this. I want to get your thoughts on all of the themes that have been included in these two shows so far.
Everything? How much time do we have left? Yeah, WandaVision. Ugh, what a ride. And they packed so much in. Oh my God. We've talked about escapism a little bit. Like that level of commitment to the escapism theme by Wanda Maximoff. Like, imagine if that was like how we dealt with loss, was like, well,
Mhm.
I'm gonna go into my own little world and I'm gonna sort things out. And it's not gonna be better when I'm gonna come out, but I'm gonna understand a little bit about what happened. Like, oh, what a world that she created out of loss. But it wasn't a good world. Like she still caused a lot of harm unintentionally, and just so many feelings for her. Like deep empathy and I guess some pity as well, but also just awe at what this woman can do. um and yeah, just, it's uh, the way that they played sitcom comedy American values with the new weird verse that Disney has created with Marvel. Um, it's brilliant. Sorry, I feel like I'm flubbing up words because I'm just like, it was beautiful.
That's okay.
But
That
I think it is absolutely necessary to talk about mental health. Like I said, husband psychologist, this is his fight every day, is we have a whole bunch of stigma around mental health. And because of that, people who need help are not getting help. Whether it's the people themselves don't think they need to seek it, or people who are administering help are like, you're fine, you'll figure it out. And that's not great. And that
yeah.
is because we have seen things like Westerns in the past that have really built up this stoic, unfeeling, toxic masculinity, if I can say that on here, with the John Wayne character, where he's just like, I don't feel anything. I just go with my gut and I do what I do. Like, if that's in our mentality of what masculinity is and what being an American is, like that's not a whole lot of fun. So seeing Wanda, who is she American at this point? I don't know. I don't know if she wants to be claimed as American, but if she wants to, welcome arms girl, come, 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 come. She is normalizing the just intense grief that comes with losing everything. Like she has nothing. And oh my God, just every sorry, you have to do captions for this. It's just gonna be like lots of stuttering. um oh yes. If you want to go see a therapist, go get a therapist. Don't take over a town in New Jersey.
And
That's my message.
and I think that this I think these shows will help with that messaging. I think seeing Bucky Barnes in the Falcon and the Winter Soldier be so resistant, and then kind of making this last episode, spoiler alert, seemingly kind of turning a corner a little bit. Plus, with the help of his, partner in buddy comedy, him and Sam and their relationship, and kind of how it's evolved, and how they, that relationship of, we really, really like each other, but we have to kind of we have to pick on each other also. Um, and which I think is very relatable to people, and I think it's important. I think and Moon Knight, a project coming next year on Disney Plus. You said you just purchased the subscription to the Marvel comics, the Unlimited. When Moon Knight gets a little bit closer and you start reading a little bit about Moon Knight, that deals with a lot of it as well, which is it is really, really interesting the way that like these stories are dealing with all of this, and kind of starting these conversations for people. Now, I do anything else that you want to say about like the stories, whether they're MCU, whether they're anything else, because there's something that I want to transition to, actually what we originally thought we were going to talk about. but I want to give you a chance if there's anything else you want to say also.
Let's go on. It'll just be
Okay.
the stuttering mess of what is me fangirling for Wanda.
The so what originally caught my attention when you talked at the symposium was this idea of film-induced tourism, and this idea of not just like going to a place where something was actually filmed, but this idea with theme parks now, and the biggest two being Disney and Universal, and their purchase of IP and their use of IP in the parks. I mean, let alone that MGM Studios in Orlando and Universal Florida in Orlando were actually working studios at one point. The Psycho television show was shot at Universal Florida. That's why they had the Bates Motel and the Psycho House. I still remember the intro video to MGM Studios being the short where you see Bette Midler like chasing a lottery ticket through the city, and it's all shot in MGM Studios, and they kind of go through how they did it. But the lands that themed entertainment companies are building, does that qualify as kind of your definition of film-induced tourism? Like, could you go to these places and feel that, yeah, I'm not where they shot the movie, but I am here where Andy plays in his backyard, with where the Millennium Falcon lands and everything?
Yeah, I think that is totally fair to consider that film-based tourism. It is a very specific strand that only those big theme parks can pull off. But totally, totally fair. Like, I personally am not going to whatever castle in Scotland they filmed Harry Potter in, because I mean, I'm gonna have way more fun on the roller coasters in Orlando. Like, if those are my choices, also it's probably cheaper for me to go to Florida than to Scotland at the moment. I'm acting like I'm going anywhere. There's still travel restrictions. I'm not going anywhere. But yeah, I mean, that's what everyone that I know has said when you show up to Diagon Alley the first time, is you're like, whoa, this is everything that I thought it would be. Like, the only thing that's distracting is I'm surrounded by people in flip-flops.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if people were in costume, if it was required to wear a costume, there'd be no difference. It's absolutely film-based tourism, and it is based on the audience's perception as well. So some of the research that's been done is mostly in New Zealand for Lord of the Rings. Like, that is a big space for film-based tourism research. And so we have this weirdness of, hey, we're on a hill where they filmed this part. You're not in Middle Earth. You know that, right? And the tourists are like, duh, we know that. And they're like, it doesn't matter, because this is where it happened. And it's maybe not where Legolas himself was, but Orlando Bloom as Legolas was here. And therefore it is historical, just like in a shorter timeline, and with our timeline, our story, not necessarily Middle Earth story. So that is to say, it is about audience perception. We're not going expecting it to be actually Diagon Alley or Pandora or whatever it happens to be, because we know. But that is, oh goodness, this is a vocab word for me. the Oh, I should have written this down. But the expectation of the tourist location and the tourists themselves, like we have this unspoken agreement.
Yeah.
When we go to a place, we're going to suspend our belief for just a little bit so that we can have this experience. And the tourist location says, and we're gonna staged authenticity, that's the word. So we're going to give you an authentic experience, but we've done a lot of work to make sure that it's going to kick off every single time the way that it should. So that is film-based tourism. Totally fair to include the big theme parks. Just know that that is not what it has to be at all.
Yeah. And another thing that you had mentioned is kind of how, especially with a company like Disney, who owns at this point a lot, there's so much cross promotion. You know, how many episodes of Modern Family were shot at Disneyland? How many specials can you turn on Disney Plus and watch that people are running around the Magic Kingdom doing different activities? And by the way, those are people that appear in other Disney shows, either on the Disney Channel or on ABC. You know, Megan Donnelly is one that has really kind of taken off with this idea of from Disney to ABC and on American Housewife, and kind of giving back to the movies and everything. How much do you think that impacts consumption? So when you see a character from your favorite show at a Disney park, you think that makes people more likely to want to go to Disney? And in turn, people who are fans of the parks, you think that makes them more likely to watch the shows?
Well, I will speak from my personal experience as the 4-year-old who got her mind blown. I mean, back when it was my first trip to Disney, they would send out a VHS tape to get you all psyched up, which I still watched for some reason, even as time went on. I was like, yeah, I'm going to watch this 15-minute promotional VHS about a place I'm not going to anytime soon. Yeah. But there was a moment where Alice is in the teacups with a regular girl, tourist girl. And I was like, oh my God, I got to ride the teacups with Alice. I don't think I had even seen Alice in Wonderland, but I was like, I'm doing it. That's where we're going. Turns out Alice does not ride the teacups regularly. So I did not live that dream, but it's all good. Because it got me really psyched up that I could potentially ride a ride with a character associated with it, even though I was way too young to have the concept of it. And I don't think that stops as we grow up. Like, it can get more sophisticated, it can get a little bit different, but like, I think that's still I saw this and those people seem to be having fun. I'm gonna go have fun. It's essentially a commercial. It's a really long, well-scripted commercial. And again, if we're gonna talk about those Disney accountants, like I've watched Disney fairy tale weddings. I will admit that. Okay. Did I watch it by myself? No, my brother joined me. But we watched it, and I don't know what it costs to get Olivia Newton-John to perform a concert. Spoiler alert. But whatever it costs to get her down there, they must have figured out they were going to make more in whatever couples were going to be booking after seeing that episode. I don't think she comes down often. I have no idea. I have not pursued this further, but yeah, I don't think Disney makes these long, intense cross-promotional commercials unless they think it's going to work.
And they are very, very, very good at cross promotion. I mean, you look at the and real quickly on this, like we have Galaxy's Edge, we have Toy Story Land in Walt Disney World. We're gonna have Avengers Campus in Disney California Adventure. If you were able to go, because you are in California, if you are able to go when Avengers Campus opens up, we need to have a future talk about that and about that land. And you also they have flipped the script somewhat, that you have these movies and these properties based on Haunted Mansion, Pirates of the Caribbean. You know, when Tomorrowland, when Marvel was first purchased or acquired by Disney, they actually put out a series of comics based on the Haunted Mansion, Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, the Enchanted Tiki Room, Seekers of the Weird, which was this was kind of, it was an attraction never built. It was the early version of the Haunted Mansion, really. And you have shows that are being made for Disney Plus, like Magic Kingdoms, and games, the Magic Kingdoms, and then book series like the Kingdom Keepers. They are very, very good at cross promoting. And so, just before we get to our last segment of the rapid questions, what else would you say about kind of the way Disney approaches filmed induced tourism in their parks? And is that the future of what we're going to see in Disney parks?
I mean, yeah, we're seeing it. Like, they didn't purchase Marvel without a plan 10 years ago, probably more than that now. And people are pumped. Like, yeah. But there's also people who are nostalgic, like people who are like, oh, why would you change Splash Mountain? It is what it is. And there are people who really like the park specific IP, like the orange bird for Epcot, I believe.
It is the Enchanted Tiki Room.
Tiki Room, sorry.
The terrace outside of there, I should say.
Yeah. I was wrong. I mixed up Orange Bird and Figment.
No worries.
So I don't think it's gonna go full cinematic IP, because I mean, that's not their whole audience. There are people who are park obsessed. Like you said, there's a comic for Haunted Mansion. The amount of Haunted Mansion specific merchandise is unreal. And it has nothing to do with the Eddie Murphy movie that came out. That didn't go anywhere. But yeah, I have a Haunted Mansion board game. Why? Because someone knew that I liked Disney and they were like, here you go. And it rocks. I love it. So yeah, they're I don't think they're going to go full only movie characters. But they have them, and there's not a whole lot wrong for them to not use them. They're there.
Yep.
But yeah, the park specific IP also, people love it. People love it.
And you mentioned Figment. Figment, I think, is my favorite. He definitely is my favorite parks character. Might be my favorite Disney character. I'm not sure. I have a collection of Figment, and try to pass that on as much as I can to people. I, for one, am I really wish that old Marvel contract would get worked out to where Marvel characters could be used west of the Mississippi and east of the Mississippi. And so you would see Marvel characters in Walt Disney World the same way we see them internationally and at Disneyland as well. The last thing that I like to do with guests is just a few rapid questions, and you can explain if you want. You don't have to explain at all because you've already given more time than you needed to. But
Was no effort. I'm having so much fun.
then things like this could go on for 4 hours if I knew people would listen. um, so you said you focused a lot on Walt Disney World because those are the parks you've been to the most. Do you have a favorite gate? So a park.
Favorite gate? Just to
Yeah.
like walk through. Oh
No,
man.
no. So favorite park, Magic
Okay.
Kingdom, Hollywood Studios,
It would be Epcot.
Epcot.
Yeah, that's where I spent the most time working. It's just such a cool concept for a work.
Where did you work in Epcot?
Mostly Future World. I
Okay.
did mouse gear and I did custodial.
Okay. Anywhere in Walt Disney World, any park, favorite ride?
Tower of Terror.
Tower of Terror. Okay.
Yeah. I've been on drop rides at Six Flags. No. This is a whole nother level.
Tower of Terror was actually each semester in class we do a best or favorite Walt Disney World attraction, and spring 2021 that was actually the class's favorite attraction, Tower of Terror. It came down to that and Haunted Mansion, so it was the two scary rides, but the more thrilling one won out.
You have some smart kids.
favorite show attraction anywhere on, and that could be in the parks, that could be at any of the resorts, Disney Springs, doesn't matter.
Festival of the Lion King. Like
Okay.
every time. I know what's happening. Doesn't matter. Gets me every time.
And I just read this morning that's actually opening back up in May. They're going to open that back up. Anywhere on the parks, do you have a favorite resort or hotel on property?
Man, they're all so cool. I know my dad's favorite is Pop Century. It's fine. Yeah, I went to a lot of them.
And it's Pop Century's on the Skyliner route now.
Yeah.
So favorite restaurant anywhere on property? Again, that's parks, Disney Springs, any resort.
I'll say Sanaa.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not the first time I've heard that. So I've
It's
never
a good
been,
one.
but there have been several people who've said that.
That's the one.
And then favorite treat in the parks?
The pretzel or the Dole Whip.
Dole Whip or the pretzel?
Both are vegan.
This last time we went, September 2019 is the first time I had a Dole Whip, and
What took so long?
I don't know. I left having 4 or 5 though to make up for it though. So, and then the last one for Disney specific, and then I have one that I want to finish up with. Favorite Disney character. That could be Disney proper, so animated, live action, whatever. It could be any of the acquisitions as well, Star Wars, Marvel, now any of the Fox properties as well that they would own.
So many. My go-to is Genie.
Okay.
From Aladdin. He's been my favorite for a long time. He's just pure and lovely, and I think what we should all aspire to be.
Okay.
Magical and funny.
And one more thing that when we were talking about Old Tucson, and do you think a major company such as Disney or another company, but a company that is in the themed entertainment business, do you think anybody would step in and purchase old Tucson. And do you think, like, is that kind of a path forward to being able to open it again and keep it running? And is that something that would be advisable, or would that be slightly problematic to see?
Last I heard, which I don't know what the source was, so this treated as a rumor. It was actually John Wayne's kids who were looking
Okay.
into buying it the last I heard. So I think we don't want to lose old Tucson because it is cool. It is fun and it has a lot of culture baked into it from the get-go. But I think if um, the John Wayne he has a company, right? It's
Mhm.
or whoever's in charge of his estate. I think if that were to be associated with John Wayne, um, they should bring in some consultants to make sure that it's not too problematic. that is that is what I will say on that.
Well, and thank you so much for this. And as I said, this could go on for, we'll do more visits for sure, in the future on various things. But what, for anybody watching or listening, that wants to follow you, wants to follow Slightly Problematic, what's the best way to be able to do so?
Yeah, our website is slightlyproblematic.net. And if you want to find us on the social medias, it's at slightprob.net, which is spelled SLTPRBDOTNET. So it's a little hard, but if you go to the website, it'll take you right to it.
Well, awesome. Sarah, thank you so much for this. It was such a great conversation. And as I said, one that will spur probably 100 more questions that we'll have to talk about at some point. So thank you so much for talking with us.
Yeah, this was, oh, I just got to fangirl for 2 hours. The pleasure was mine.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Have a great rest of the day.
You too. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.